Well, after a little less than 2 years, we finally have a new season. And not only a new season, but one that's pretty great, which is amazing to see. I definitely plan on making a video about the season as a whole, but as of right now, I haven't watched everything. So to fill in the time leading up to that upload, I figured I could make a quick add-on to my video about USS Callister. About 6 months ago, I made a video all about Robert Daly, the main villain of USS Callister, and why he works so well as a villain. So you can imagine my interest when I learned that Season 7 of Black Mirror would be doing their first ever sequel episode, a sequel of what else but USS Callister. When I heard that, I guessed that there was probably going to be a bit of Daly in the episode. He got stuck in his own mod at the end of the original, sure, but there were two obvious reasons as to why he was going to come back. A, he's really important to the plotline, theming, and all characters in the story, and B, let's be real, it's making their ratings skyrocket. So while the trailers made the episode seem like it was going to be more action-focused, I was looking forward to the kernel of Daly that this would bring us, and what they brought was very interesting. I don't think it's perfect, which is why I'm starting off with my gripes, but it also completely captures the essence of what made Daly captivating in the first, while bringing a new twist to it, so let's get straight into it. To start off with, a recap. At the start, Daly is mentioned a lot by the crew, who all talk about how awful and terrible he was. Later, in-game Walton talks about how when he was first making Infinity with Daly, he profited off of him a bit, but more importantly used the digital cloning equipment to put a version of Daly in the code. This way he could generate worlds endlessly. The crew go looking for him to see if he could make them a private universe so that they'll be safe from all other players. When Nanette finds him, he appears to be pretty chill and polite. He then makes the world and starts sending them over, but instead of transferring them, he's copy and pasting them because he wants some people around to keep him company. When Nanette objects to this, he accidentally erases her mouth and slams her into the wall because of his god powers, and then is stabbed in the head. So, with all of that out of the way, let's start the cons. The first issue that I had with the episode was that it made him feel a little too sympathetic. While this was good in some ways, which I'll get into soon, at times it just made some situations a little more murky and unclear. The best example is at the end, where Daly wants to keep Nanette and her crew members around. There's a throwaway line before that where he speaks about how he spent 500 years down here. That is a pretty terrible thing to have to go through, but the episode portrays it as just a funny line that he says. That makes the scene where Nanette throws a knife into his head a little more A similar thing happens which actually recontextualizes the first episode. In this one, Walton is so cartoonishly evil that it makes Daly transferring him in the first episode seem almost understandable, which kind of messes with the point the original was going for. However, that one probably isn't as bad, and I'll get into it more later. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is the writing and acting, specifically at Daly's final scene. Neither of those things were awful, but they did feel a little detached from the original episode. I don't know, it just felt a bit off and it was kind of distracting. By the end it was fine, same thing with the flashback scenes, but it was noticeable when Daly was talking about Space Fleet or saying, I wouldn't do something like that. Finally, and this isn't an issue with Daly himself, but good lord does Walton not have the sauce. Don't get me wrong, he was pretty funny and a viable threat at many points, but when you have to compare him to Daly, it's like the difference between an award-winning baguette from France and the $3 loaves lying on the shelves at the supermarket. But that's what I disliked. Now on to what I thought was actually great. Firstly, it really explores Daly as a character. This was where the sympathy you felt for him actually helped the story, and I think it's the main thing this episode did better than the original. In this episode, we learned that Daly was not only mistreated by Walton, but in their early career, borderline abused. He took half of the money from his creation, he only thought about himself, he bought illegal technology and used it on Daly. This all starts to build the idea that maybe Daly wasn't as terrible a person as we originally thought. Maybe he was just an introverted guy who didn't have great social skills, learning from Walton that he needed to retaliate against people in order for them not to take advantage of him. This is proven even more by the fact that Walton was the first person to be transported in the Space Fleet mod, using technology that Walton introduced to him. And while this is all interesting on its own, it improves tenfold when we get to meet God Mode Daly. One that didn't fall into the path of narcissism and psychopathy. One that just wanted to make a game. And the episode entertains the idea that he's just kind of a geeky person who wants to help. This time, rather than hurting Nanette, he writes the code, gives her the solution, and even does some roleplay in the meantime, that's fun. And then, just as things are about to get sorted, he starts to copy and paste, rather than cut and paste. He still wants to keep people for himself, against their will. This is where I think the episode is at its most interesting. Daly isn't the same self-righteously vile person that he was in the original. Now he's more hidden, less understanding of himself, and more dangerous in a sense. It is a really strong statement on how anyone with even a slightly flawed personality, given the power of the digital space, will never turn out okay. Something's going to break and people are going to get hurt. Alongside this, my favourite part of the episode by a light year was his nice guy monologue. Holy crap, now that is some well written antagonist dialogue. You perfectly understand his view, you can see every single flaw in his logic, and most importantly, you realise that none of those flaws could ever convince him. I also love how it dives into a subsection of the original's theme of toxic masculinity, that being nice guy syndrome. When someone believes that he deserves women just because he's so nice. God Mode Daly clearly has a very strong case of this. I really like this pivot because not only does it expand on the original in an understandable and interesting way, but it makes sense in the story. Since Daly doesn't have the excuse that he was mistreated to excuse his self-centeredness, he turns to the quality of his character. I also find the idea of nice guys in fiction to be disturbing in a really investing way. It's one of the more slimy, complicated and creepy parts of this world, and I think this episode handled it well if you ignore the part where she stabs him in the head. Daly very obviously believes in what he's saying, and is hurt that Nanette disagrees with him, and she tiptoes around him knowing that he could hurt her so easily. This is unnervingly close to real life, especially when, without even realizing it, Daly makes it so she can't speak. After this, he's shocked, but doesn't undo it. This scene is really good at reasserting how terrible of a person Daly is, and I cannot get enough of it. And to top it off, Jesse Plemons acts really well and the score is good. Look, I could go on, but I've gotten the points across. So, to conclude, I thought that this episode was pretty great, and what it did with Daly was not what I expected. It definitely wasn't perfect in some points since he wasn't the focal point of the episode, but I think they actually gave him a surprising amount of layering, and it's gotten better the more time I've had to discuss and think about it. So yeah, I'm hoping to get a Season 7 ranking up in the not too distant future, but we'll just have to see how that goes. Worst case scenario, I'll do a long form analysis on one of the episodes. I'm really excited to see what else this season has to offer, since I haven't finished it yet. Anyways, thanks for watching, don't press the red button, and cue the outro music.